The treasure that time forgot. The year was 1900, and the Mediterranean Sea was about to reveal one of history's most confounding secrets. Captain Dimitrios Kondos and his crew of Greek sponge divers were fighting for their lives against a violent storm that had pushed them far from their intended course. These weren't tourists on a pleasure cruise. These were hardened men who spent their days diving to dangerous depths, holding their breath for minutes at a time, risking their lives to harvest the precious sponges that wealthy Europeans demanded for their bathhouses. But on this particular day, something extraordinary was waiting for them beneath the waves near the tiny island of Antikythera. Something that would challenge everything historians thought they knew about ancient technology. Something that would force us to completely rewrite the story of human innovation. The storm had been merciless, but it had also been oddly generous. It had driven Kondos and his men to a stretch of water they had never explored before, where the sea floor dropped away into mysterious depths. When the weather finally calmed, they found themselves anchored above what appeared to be virgin diving territory. For sponge divers, this was like striking gold. Unexplored waters meant untouched sponge beds, and untouched sponge beds meant serious money. Elias Stediatis, one of the most experienced divers on the crew, was the first to descend. He strapped on his primitive diving helmet, checked his airline one final time, and disappeared beneath the surface. The other men waited on deck, watching the bubbles rise and counting the minutes. They expected him to surface with news of rich sponge beds. Instead, when Stediatis finally broke the surface, he was babbling incoherently about dead bodies and horses scattered across the ocean floor. The crew thought he had succumbed to nitrogen narcosis, that dangerous condition divers call rapture of the deep. But Captain Kondos was not a man to take chances with his crew's safety or his potential profits. He decided to investigate personally. What he found down there changed everything. The bodies Stediatis had seen were actually marble statues, their white limestone gleaming eerily in the filtered sunlight. The horses were bronze sculptures, their metal surfaces turned green by centuries of saltwater corrosion. Kondos had stumbled upon the scattered remains of an ancient shipwreck, but this was no ordinary cargo vessel. The sheer quantity and quality of the artifacts suggested this had been a treasure ship, perhaps carrying the spoils of war or the collected art of some wealthy Roman collector. When Kondos and his crew hauled their first artifacts to the surface, they knew they had discovered something unprecedented. Bronze statues of gods and heroes, marble busts of philosophers and politicians, jewellery, coins and pottery filled their boat. But hidden among these obvious treasures was something that looked far less impressive. A corroded lump of bronze, roughly the size of a large book, encrusted with marine growth and seemingly worthless. This unremarkable chunk of metal would prove to be the most important discovery in the history of archaeology. But nobody knew that yet. The Greek government, recognizing the historical significance of the find, immediately organized an official expedition to recover the rest of the wreck. For months, divers worked in dangerous conditions to bring up artifact after artifact. The haul was spectacular. Statues that now grace the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, bronze masterpieces that represent the pinnacle of ancient artistic achievement, and enough archaeological material to keep scholars busy for decades. But that corroded bronze lump remained a mystery. It sat in storage for nearly 2 years, largely ignored by archaeologists who were far more interested in the beautiful statuary and obvious art objects. After all, What could be exciting about a piece of corroded metal when you had perfect marble statues to study? Then, in 1902, archaeologist Valerios Staios was examining the stored artifacts when he noticed something extraordinary. The bronze lump had split open, revealing glimpses of what lay inside. He could see the unmistakable shapes of bronze gears, intricate mechanical components that seemed to belong to some kind of clockwork device. But this was impossible. The shipwreck dated to around 70 BCE, making these gears over 2,000 years old. The problem was that mechanical gears like these weren't supposed to exist until the late medieval period, more than 1,000 years later. Staios found himself staring at what appeared to be proof of impossible technology. The implications were staggering. If ancient Greeks could create sophisticated mechanical devices, what else might they have achieved that we've completely forgotten? What other technologies might have been lost to time, buried beneath the waves, or crumbled to dust in forgotten ruins? The scientific community's initial reaction was predictable. Many scholars simply refused to believe what they were seeing. The gears must be from a much later period, they argued. Perhaps the mechanism had somehow been introduced to the wreck site centuries after the original sinking. Or maybe the dating of the wreck itself was wrong. Anything seemed more plausible than accepting that ancient Greeks had created sophisticated mechanical computers. But as more experts examined the device, the evidence became undeniable. The bronze composition matched other artifacts from the wreck. The marine encrustation was consistent with 2,000 years of underwater exposure. Most importantly, the mechanical components were integrated into the corrosion layers in ways that proved they had been underwater for the same length of time as everything else recovered from the site. The world was slowly beginning to realize that this wasn't just an interesting archaeological curiosity. This was evidence of a level of technological sophistication that historians had never imagined possible in the ancient world. The mechanism represented a quantum leap in complexity compared to any other known ancient device. It was as if archaeologists had discovered a smartphone in a medieval castle or a jet engine in a Roman villa. Early researchers who examined the mechanism were baffled by its complexity. They could identify dozens of bronze gears, some as small as coins, others as large as dinner plates. The precision of the craftsmanship was remarkable. These weren't crude, hammered pieces of metal. They were precisely machined components with carefully calculated gear ratios and intricate tooth patterns that had been cut with mathematical precision. The device also contained extensive inscriptions in ancient Greek, but these were no ordinary texts. They appeared to be operating instructions, astronomical data, and complex mathematical calculations. The level of scientific knowledge reflected in these inscriptions was far beyond what scholars had attributed to ancient Greek civilization. As researchers studied the mechanism more closely, they began to realize that this wasn't just a collection of random gears. It was clearly some kind of calculating device, designed to perform complex mathematical operations. But what kind of calculations? And why would ancient Greeks need a machine capable of such sophisticated computations? The mystery deepened when researchers discovered that the mechanism's gear ratios corresponded to astronomical cycles. The device seemed to be designed to track the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable precision. But this raised even more questions. Why would ancient Greeks need to predict the positions of planets and stars with such accuracy? What could they possibly have been using this information for? The more scientists learned about the Antikythera Mechanism, the more questions arose. Every answer seemed to lead to two new mysteries. If the ancient Greeks could build devices this sophisticated, why weren't there more examples? Why didn't ancient writers describe such machines in their works? Why did this technology apparently disappear without a trace? Perhaps most troubling of all was the realization that the mechanism represented knowledge that historians thought had been lost for over a millennium. The device incorporated astronomical calculations that modern scholars believed weren't rediscovered until the Renaissance. It used mathematical principles that weren't supposed to be known until the work of Copernicus and Kepler in the 16th and 17th centuries. The Antikythera Mechanism was forcing historians to confront an uncomfortable truth. Everything they thought they knew about the intellectual capabilities of ancient civilizations might be wrong. The Greeks weren't just philosophers and artists, they were also sophisticated engineers and mathematicians who had achieved technological breakthroughs that wouldn't be matched again for over 1,000 years. But if this was true, what had happened to all that knowledge? How could an entire civilization's worth of technical expertise simply vanish? And if the Antikythera mechanism survived by pure chance, preserved in the anaerobic environment of the deep ocean, what other marvels of ancient technology might have been lost forever? The questions were multiplying faster than the answers, and each new discovery seemed to deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. The mechanism was becoming more than just an archaeological curiosity. It was becoming a window into a lost world of ancient innovation that was far more sophisticated than anyone had ever imagined. As we stand here today, more than a century after its discovery, the Antikythera mechanism continues to challenge our assumptions about the past. It reminds us that history isn't just about kings and battles and the rise and fall of empires. It's also about the brilliant minds who pushed the boundaries of human knowledge, who solved complex problems with ingenious solutions, and who created technologies that were so advanced they seemed like magic to their contemporaries. The story of the Antikythera mechanism is ultimately a story about human curiosity and ingenuity. It's about the drive to understand the world around us, to predict the future, and to create tools that extend our capabilities beyond the limits of our own minds and bodies. It's a story that connects us directly to our ancient ancestors, revealing that the same spark of innovation that drives modern technology was burning brightly in the minds of Greek craftsmen over 2,000 years ago. But the mechanism also represents something more troubling. It's a reminder of how fragile human knowledge really is. The techniques used to create this device were apparently lost completely, not to be rediscovered until the modern age. Entire libraries of technical knowledge simply vanished, taking with them the accumulated wisdom of generations of ancient engineers and scientists. This raises profound questions about our own technological civilization. What knowledge are we creating today that might be lost to future generations? What innovations are we taking for granted that might seem like impossible magic to archaeologists digging through the ruins of our cities 1,000 years from now? The Antikythera mechanism stands as both an inspiration and a warning. It shows us what human ingenuity can achieve, but it also reminds us that progress is not inevitable. Knowledge can be lost as easily as it is gained. Technologies can disappear as quickly as they emerge. The mechanism survived only because of an extraordinary accident of preservation. How many other marvels of ancient technology weren't so lucky? As we prepare to dive deeper into the mystery of this ancient computer, we're embarking on a journey that will take us from the workshops of ancient Greek craftsmen to the cutting-edge laboratories of modern scientists. We'll explore how a device that shouldn't exist according to conventional history has forced us to completely reimagine the technological capabilities of our ancestors. But first, we need to understand the world that created this impossible machine. We need to journey back to an age when the greatest minds of humanity were wrestling with the fundamental questions of existence, when mathematics and astronomy were considered the highest forms of human knowledge, and when the boundary between science and magic was far thinner than we might imagine. The story of the Antikythera Mechanism is really the story of human civilization itself. It's about our endless quest to understand the universe and our place within it. It's about the eternal human drive to create, to discover, and to push beyond the boundaries of what seems possible. And most importantly, it's about the price we pay when that precious knowledge is lost to time. What we're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. It will reveal a civilization that was far more sophisticated than our history books suggest. And it will force us to confront the unsettling possibility that we might not be as far advanced as we think we are. The ancient Greeks who created the Antikythera mechanism were not primitive people struggling with basic technology. They were sophisticated engineers and mathematicians who had achieved breakthroughs that wouldn't be matched again for over a millennium. They had unlocked secrets of the universe that we're only now beginning to understand. And they had done it all without the benefit of modern tools, computers, or scientific instruments. How did they do it? What knowledge did they possess that we've forgotten? And what other secrets might be waiting to be discovered in the ruins of the ancient world? The answers to these questions will take us on a journey through time, from the storm-tossed waters of the Mediterranean to the intellectual centres of the ancient world, from the workshops of forgotten craftsmen to the laboratories of modern scientists. It's a journey that will change the way you think about the past, the present, and the future of human knowledge. But that journey begins with a simple question that has haunted researchers for over a century. How could the ancient Greeks have created something so sophisticated that we're still struggling to understand it today? The answer, as we're about to discover, is far more extraordinary than anyone could have imagined. Chapter 2. The Genius of Forgotten Minds. You know what's terrifying about the Antikythera mechanism? It's not just that it exists, it's that we almost dismissed it as worthless junk. For 73 years, this bronze miracle sat in a museum drawer while experts called it unimportant debris. But here's what will make your skin crawl. If one corroded gear hadn't caught the light just right on that spring morning in 1902, we might never have discovered that everything we believed about ancient intelligence was catastrophically wrong. The truth that's about to unfold will challenge every assumption you've ever made about human progress, because the minds that created this device weren't primitive. They weren't struggling with basic mathematics or crude tools. They were intellectual giants whose capabilities would make modern engineers weep with envy. Journeying back to ancient Greece, the lost world of infinite possibility. Close your eyes and forget everything you think you know about ancient Greece. Forget the Hollywood images of simple togas and crude pottery. What I'm about to show you is the most sophisticated intellectual ecosystem in human history, a world where mathematical precision met artistic genius, where theoretical breakthroughs transformed into mechanical marvels. 2,300 years ago, while most of the world struggled with basic arithmetic, the Greeks were solving problems that wouldn't be tackled again until the Renaissance. But here's the psychological trick your brain is playing on you right now. You're probably thinking, sure, they were smart, but not that smart. That's exactly what every expert thought until they started digging deeper into the mechanism's complexity. Alexandria wasn't just a city, it was humanity's first think tank. The Library of Alexandria contained over 700,000 scrolls, each one hand-copied by scholars who understood that knowledge dies without preservation. But here's what will shock you. These weren't just philosophical treatises. Hidden among those scrolls were detailed engineering manuals, mechanical blueprints, and mathematical proofs that would make your calculator jealous. Walk through the halls of the Museum of Alexandria, not just a building, but a community of 100 resident scholars, all supported by the state to do nothing but think, experiment, and innovate. These weren't isolated geniuses. They were a network of brilliant minds, constantly sharing ideas, challenging each other's theories, and building upon previous discoveries. Sound familiar? It should, because they invented the very concept of collaborative scientific research that we use today. And here's the detail that will haunt you. Every morning at dawn, these scholars would gather in the great courtyard to debate the most complex problems facing humanity. Not politics, not gossip, mathematical proofs, astronomical observations, engineering challenges. Their casual breakfast conversations were more intellectually sophisticated than most modern university lectures. The intellectual giants, minds that bent reality now, let me introduce you to three men whose intellectual capacity was so extraordinary that their names should be whispered with the same reverence we reserve for Einstein and Newton. Except, here's the psychological twist that will make you question everything. These men lived over 2,000 years ago, and their insights were so advanced that we're still catching up to some of their ideas. Archimedes, the man who could move the world. Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth. When Archimedes said this, he wasn't boasting. He was stating a mathematical fact about leverage that he had proven with geometric precision. But here's what your textbooks never told you. Archimedes didn't just understand leverage theoretically. He built machines of such devastating effectiveness that Roman soldiers fled in terror when they saw them in action. During the siege of Syracuse, Archimedes constructed cranes that could lift entire Roman ships out of the water and dash them against the rocks. He created mirrors that focused sunlight into beams hot enough to set enemy vessels ablaze from a distance. But here's the detail that should make you pause. When Roman soldiers finally breached the city walls, their general Marcellus gave explicit orders that Archimedes must be captured alive. Why? Because even Rome's greatest military minds recognized that this one man's intellectual capabilities were worth more than an entire army. And yet when a Roman soldier found Archimedes drawing geometric figures in the sand, the old mathematician reportedly said, "Don't disturb my circles," and continued working on his proof. He was killed moments later, but here's the psychological hook that reveals everything about ancient priorities. Archimedes considered his mathematical discoveries more important than his own life. Hipparchus, the man who mapped infinity. If Archimedes could move the earth, Hipparchus mapped the heavens with precision that defied belief. This man, working without telescopes, without computers, without any of our modern instruments, calculated the distance from Earth to the Moon with an accuracy that wasn't improved upon until the space age. But here's where your brain is going to start fighting the evidence. Hipparchus didn't just measure celestial distances. He discovered that the Earth wobbles on its axis, a phenomenon called precession that takes 26,000 years to complete one cycle. Think about that for a moment. Without any mechanical aids, using only careful observation and mathematical brilliance, he detected a motion so subtle that it takes literally thousands of human lifetimes to observe directly. Here's the detail that should make you question everything you think you know about ancient capabilities. Hipparchus created the first star catalogue, mapping 850 individual stars with such precision that modern astronomers still use his coordinate system. He didn't just look at the sky and make rough estimates. He developed trigonometry. Yes, he invented trigonometry, specifically to calculate stellar positions with mathematical certainty. And here's the psychological hook that ties directly to our mechanism. Every calculation Hipparchus made, every astronomical insight he discovered, every mathematical tool he developed, all of it would be essential for creating a device that could predict celestial movements years into the future. Apollonius, the geometer of the cosmos. The third genius in our trinity of forgotten brilliance was Apollonius, whose work on conic sections, circles, ellipses, parabolas, and hyperbolas provided the mathematical foundation for understanding planetary motion. But here's what will make your head spin. Apollonius developed these geometric insights 1,800 years before Kepler discovered that planets move in elliptical orbits. Apollonius didn't just draw pretty curves. He proved, with mathematical rigour, how these shapes could describe the complex motions of celestial bodies. His work, Conics, contained 387 propositions, mathematical theorems so sophisticated that they weren't fully understood again until the 17th century. Here's the psychological detail that connects everything. When modern scholars finally decoded the Antikythera Mechanism's gear ratios, they found mathematical relationships that could only have been derived from Apollonius's geometric insights. The ancient creators weren't guessing about planetary motions. They were calculating them with geometric precision that wouldn't be matched for over a millennium. The workshop of wonders, where the impossible became routine now. Here's where your modern brain is going to rebel against the evidence. You might be thinking, okay, they were smart, but how could they actually build something this complex with ancient tools? That question reveals a dangerous assumption that technological sophistication requires modern machinery. Let me shatter that illusion with facts that will make you question every timeline of human progress you've ever seen. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed workshops in ancient Greece that operated with precision tolerances, matching modern manufacturing standards. We're not talking about crude blacksmith forges. These were sophisticated facilities with specialized tools, standardized measurements, and quality control systems that would impress contemporary engineers. Here's the detail that should terrify you about how much we've forgotten. Ancient Greek craftsmen could work bronze to tolerances of less than 1 millimeter. They created gears with teeth so precisely cut that they meshed perfectly after 2,000 years of corrosion. They developed gear-cutting techniques that weren't rediscovered until the Industrial Revolution. But here's the psychological hook that reveals the true scope of their capabilities. The Antikythera Mechanism contains 37 bronze gears, each one custom-designed for a specific mathematical function. Creating just one of these gears would require weeks of precise calculation and careful craftsmanship. Creating 37 of them, all designed to work together in perfect harmony, represents a level of systematic engineering that most people assume didn't exist until the modern era. And here's what will make you lose sleep tonight. The ancient workshops that created these marvels operated for centuries. This wasn't a one-time lucky accident. There were generations of master craftsmen, each one training apprentices, passing down techniques and continuously improving their methods. They had industrial processes, quality standards, and manufacturing capabilities that we're only beginning to understand. The network of knowledge, the Internet of ancient minds. Here's where the story becomes truly extraordinary. These brilliant minds weren't working in isolation. They had created something that modern psychologists would recognize as the perfect conditions for exponential innovation, a network effect that amplified individual genius into collective breakthrough. Letters preserved on papyrus reveal a sophisticated correspondence network spanning the entire Mediterranean world. Scholars in Alexandria exchanged ideas with researchers in Rhodes. Mathematicians in Athens collaborated with engineers in Syracuse, and astronomical observations made in Egypt were quickly shared with academies in Asia Minor. But here's the psychological detail that will reframe everything. These ancient scholars were more connected to each other than most modern researchers are today. They spoke the same language, shared the same mathematical notation, and operated within a common theoretical framework that allowed for seamless collaboration across vast distances. Think about this. When Hipparchus made a new astronomical discovery, word of it would reach interested scholars across the Mediterranean within weeks. When a craftsman in Rhodes developed a new gear-cutting technique, that innovation would be adopted by workshops in Alexandria within months. They had created a real-time knowledge network using nothing but ships, letters, and human memory. Here's what should make you pause. The Antikythera Mechanism represents the culmination of this network effect. It embodies theoretical insights from Hipparchus, geometric principles from Apollonius, mechanical innovations from Archimedes, and manufacturing techniques from dozens of anonymous craftsmen across the Greek world. It's not just an ancient computer. It's proof that collaborative innovation can achieve the impossible when brilliant minds work together. And here's the detail that connects directly to our modern world. They understood something about knowledge preservation that we're only rediscovering today. They knew that individual genius is fragile, but systematic knowledge properly preserved and shared can survive for millennia. The Antikythera Mechanism isn't just a mechanical marvel. It's a time capsule containing the accumulated wisdom of humanity's first scientific civilization. So here we stand, 2,000 years later, finally beginning to comprehend the true scope of ancient Greek intellectual achievement. The Antikythera Mechanism isn't just an anomaly, it's evidence of a complete technological ecosystem that we somehow forgot existed. But here's the psychological hook that will haunt you long after this documentary ends. If they could achieve this level of sophistication 2,000 years ago, what else were they capable of? What other technologies did they develop that we haven't discovered yet? What innovations died with the fall of ancient learning centers? And here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. The Antikythera Mechanism required not just theoretical brilliance, but enormous resources, extensive time and significant financial investment. Someone commissioned this device, someone paid for its construction, someone considered it important enough to transport across the dangerous waters of the Mediterranean. Who were they? What did they need such precise astronomical predictions for? And why was it so crucial that they were willing to risk everything to obtain it? Because as we're about to discover, the mechanism's true purpose wasn't just scientific curiosity. It was designed to unlock secrets of the cosmos that held the power to predict the future itself. Chapter 3. The Code in the Cosmos. For over a century, the Antikythera Mechanism sat in fragments, its secrets locked away in corroded bronze. But then something extraordinary happened. Modern technology gave us X-ray vision into the past. When scientists first fed those ancient fragments into CT scanners, they weren't prepared for what they would find. Layer by layer, the scans peeled back 2,000 years of corrosion, revealing something that made their hands tremble. Gears, dozens of them, arranged in patterns so precise, so mathematically perfect, that they could only serve one purpose. This wasn't just a machine, this was a computer. An analog computer built before the fall of Rome, designed to solve problems that we thought were impossible for ancient minds to even comprehend. Dr. Tony Freeth spent years staring at those scans, mapping every tooth on every gear, every scratch on every surface. What he discovered changed everything we thought we knew about ancient Greek astronomy. The mechanism wasn't just predicting the movements of celestial bodies, it was doing something far more sophisticated. It was calculating the future of the cosmos itself. Think about what that means for a moment. 2,000 years ago, someone built a machine that could tell you exactly where the sun, moon, and planets would be on any given date, years into the future. Not approximately, exactly. With precision that rivals modern astronomical software. But here's what will make your mind reel. The ancient Greeks weren't supposed to know the mathematical principles that make this possible. According to every history book, those discoveries wouldn't come for another 1,500 years. The dance of the planets. When you look up at the night sky, everything appears to move in perfect circles around Earth. The sun rises and sets, the moon phases through its cycle, the planets wander against the backdrop of stars. For thousands of years, humans assumed these movements were simple, predictable patterns. But the ancient Greeks who built this mechanism knew better. They understood something that would make modern astronomers applaud in amazement. The mechanism's gears are arranged to account for the elliptical orbits of celestial bodies. Not circular orbits, elliptical ones. This means whoever designed it understood that planetary motion follows complex mathematical curves, not simple circles. Let me put this in perspective for you. Johannes Kepler didn't publish his laws of elliptical planetary motion until 1609. That's 16 centuries after someone was already building machines based on these principles. The main gear train of the mechanism uses a ratio of 254 to 19. This might seem like random numbers, but they represent something profound. This ratio allows the mechanism to track the sun's position through the zodiac with stunning accuracy. But it gets even more impressive. A secondary gear system uses the ratio 462 to 60. This tracks the moon's position, accounting for the fact that lunar months don't divide evenly into solar years. The ancient Greeks called this the great inequality of the moon, and solving it required mathematical insights that modern scholars thought were lost until the Islamic Golden Age. But the mechanism goes further. Much further, there's a gear train that predicts the positions of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Each planet required its own complex mathematical solution because each follows its own unique orbital pattern. The engineers who built this device had to understand 5 different sets of astronomical calculations, then translate each one into precise bronze gears. This wasn't just impressive engineering, this was theoretical astronomy converted into physical form, creating a 3-dimensional model of the cosmos that fit in your hands. The eclipse predictor. Now we reach the most extraordinary capability of the mechanism, the feature that transforms it from impressive to absolutely mind-bending. It could predict eclipses, not just solar eclipses, not just lunar eclipses, both types with precise timing years in advance. You need to understand what this meant in the ancient world. Eclipses weren't just astronomical curiosities, they were omens, divine messages, political game changers. Kings rose and fell based on their ability to interpret celestial signs. But here's the crucial point. Predicting eclipses requires understanding the three-dimensional geometry of space. You need to know that the Moon orbits Earth at an angle, that this angle changes over time, and that eclipses only occur when the Sun, Earth and Moon align in specific ways. The mechanism contains a dial specifically designed for eclipse prediction, inscribed with letters that indicate the type, time and characteristics of each eclipse. The engineers somehow encoded the complex mathematical relationships that govern these rare alignments into a mechanical calculator that could be operated by turning a single crank. Think about the level of astronomical knowledge this represents. These ancient engineers understood that lunar eclipses occur when Earth's shadow falls on the Moon. They knew that solar eclipses happen when the Moon's shadow falls on Earth. They grasped the three-dimensional nature of orbital mechanics well enough to predict exactly when these shadows would align. But the mechanism reveals an even deeper understanding. It accounts for the fact that eclipses follow an 18-year, 11-day cycle called the Saros. This cycle exists because of the complex interaction between the Moon's orbital period, Earth's orbital period, and the gradual shift in the orientation of the Moon's orbit. Discovering the Saros cycle requires centuries of careful observation and record-keeping. It demands mathematical sophistication to recognize the pattern and astronomical insight to understand why it exists. The Babylonians discovered it through generations of patient sky-watching, but the Greeks did something the Babylonians never achieved. They built a machine that could calculate Saros cycles mechanically, turning abstract mathematical relationships into tangible, predictable mechanical motion. The Metonic cycle, and beyond the mechanism, embodies another astronomical relationship that reveals the sophistication of its creators, the Metonic cycle. This 19-year period represents one of the most elegant solutions to a problem that frustrated ancient astronomers for centuries. Solar years and lunar months don't align neatly. 12 lunar months equal about 354 days, while a solar year lasts approximately 365 days. This means lunar calendars gradually drift out of sync with the seasons. The Greeks needed their calendar to align with both lunar phases and seasonal festivals. Religious ceremonies had to occur at specific times of year, but many were also tied to lunar cycles. This created a mathematical puzzle that required astronomical precision to solve. Meton of Athens discovered that 19 solar years equal almost exactly 235 lunar months. This relationship, known as the Metonic cycle, provided the key to creating calendars that stayed synchronized with both Sun and Moon over long periods. The mechanism doesn't just use the Metonic cycle. It physically embodies it through its gear ratios, creating a bronze computer that automatically calculates the complex relationships between solar and lunar time. But the engineers went even further. They incorporated corrections for the small discrepancies that accumulate over multiple Metonic cycles. The mechanism includes adjustments that account for the fact that the Metonic cycle isn't perfectly exact, showing a level of precision that required detailed astronomical observations spanning multiple generations. This reveals something profound about ancient Greek astronomy. They weren't just making observations and recording patterns, they were developing mathematical models of celestial mechanics, testing these models against reality, and refining them to achieve unprecedented accuracy. The mechanism represents the culmination of this process, a physical computer that embodies centuries of astronomical knowledge, mathematical insight, and engineering expertise. The mathematical miracle. When modern researchers finally decoded all the gear ratios in the mechanism, they made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the academic world. The ratios weren't approximations. They weren't close enough solutions that sacrificed accuracy for mechanical simplicity. They were exact mathematical relationships that perfectly described the motions of celestial bodies. Consider what this means from an engineering perspective. Creating precise gear ratios requires not just mathematical knowledge, but manufacturing capabilities that can cut gear teeth to exact specifications. A single tooth cut incorrectly could throw off the entire mechanism's accuracy. The gear ratios themselves reveal the depth of astronomical knowledge embedded in the device. The lunar calendar dial uses a ratio that accounts for the apogee cycle of the moon. The fact that the moon's distance from Earth varies in a predictable pattern over about 9 years. This variation affects the moon's apparent speed across the sky, and the mechanism compensates for this effect mechanically. The planetary gear trains are even more impressive. Each planet required its own mathematical solution because each follows its own unique orbital characteristics. Mars, for example, shows significant variation in brightness and apparent motion because its orbit brings it much closer to Earth at some times than others. The mechanism's Mars calculator accounts for these variations with mechanical precision. But perhaps most remarkably, the mechanism incorporates what astronomers call the great inequality of planetary motion. This refers to the fact that planets don't move at constant speeds in their orbits. They speed up when closer to the Sun and slow down when farther away. This relationship, known as Kepler's second law, wasn't supposed to be discovered until the early 1600s. Yet someone in ancient Greece understood it well enough to build mechanical computers based on these principles. The mathematical sophistication required to design such a device goes far beyond what we thought possible for ancient engineers. It represents a level of theoretical astronomy that we assumed didn't exist until the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries. The cosmic computer's true purpose. As researchers decoded more of the mechanism's capabilities, a startling realization emerged. This wasn't just a scientific instrument built for astronomical research. It was something far more practical and, in many ways, more impressive. The mechanism was designed to be portable. Its compact size and robust construction suggest it was meant to be transported, used in different locations, operated by people who might not fully understand the astronomical principles it embodied. This transforms our understanding of what the device represented. It wasn't a one-off creation by a brilliant inventor. It was a production model, designed for practical use by educated Greeks who needed accurate astronomical calculations for navigation, agriculture, religious ceremonies, and political planning. The inscriptions on the mechanism support this interpretation. They're written in plain Greek, using terminology that would be familiar to any educated citizen. The instructions are clear and practical, designed to help users operate the device without requiring deep astronomical knowledge. This suggests something extraordinary about ancient Greek society. They had developed astronomical knowledge sophisticated enough to build mechanical computers, manufacturing techniques precise enough to mass-produce complex gear systems, and educational systems advanced enough to train users in operating these cosmic calculators. The mechanism represents not just individual genius, but systematic technological capability that pervaded Greek culture at the highest levels. The questions that remain. Even after decades of intensive study, the mechanism continues to reveal new secrets and raise new questions that challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient technology. Recent analysis has identified gear ratios that don't correspond to any known astronomical cycles. These mysterious calculations suggest the mechanism incorporated astronomical knowledge that has been completely lost to history. We can see the mathematical relationships embedded in the bronze gears, but we don't know what celestial phenomena they were designed to track. Other inscriptions mention features that haven't been found in the surviving fragments. References to additional dials, supplementary gear trains and calibration procedures hint that the complete mechanism was even more sophisticated than what survived the shipwreck. Most intriguingly, microscopic analysis has revealed that the gear teeth were cut with tools that produced surface finishes comparable to modern precision instruments. This level of manufacturing capability suggests workshop traditions and technical knowledge that we're only beginning to understand. The mechanism forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility: that ancient Greek technological capabilities were far more advanced than we've been willing to admit. If they could build mechanical computers this sophisticated, what other technologies did they possess that have been lost without trace? The bronze gears of the Antikythera Mechanism don't just calculate the positions of planets, they calculate the boundaries of our assumptions about the past. And those calculations reveal that we've been dramatically underestimating the intellectual achievements of our ancestors. The cosmos that the mechanism mapped still turns above us, following the same mathematical laws that ancient Greek engineers somehow understood well enough to capture in bronze. Their computer continues to reveal its secrets, but each answer raises new questions about the true extent of human knowledge in the ancient world. What we've discovered changes everything. What we haven't discovered yet might change everything again. Chapter 4. The Lost Civilization. Everything you learned in school about ancient history was wrong. The Antikythera Mechanism has shattered every assumption we held about the technological capabilities of our ancestors, and what we're discovering next will fundamentally change how you see the ancient world forever. When archaeologists first decoded the mechanism's true complexity, they faced an uncomfortable truth. This wasn't just an isolated miracle of engineering. It was evidence of an entire lost civilization that possessed scientific knowledge we thought didn't exist until the Renaissance. The implications are staggering, and they extend far beyond a single bronze device pulled from the Mediterranean Sea. Consider the mathematical precision required to calculate the 19-year metonic cycle embedded in those ancient gears. The Greeks who built this mechanism understood orbital mechanics with an accuracy that wouldn't be matched again until Johannes Kepler published his laws of planetary motion in 1609. But here's what will shock you even more. They weren't working alone, and they weren't starting from scratch. The network of forgotten genius ancient Greece wasn't a collection of isolated city-states stumbling around in technological darkness. It was the hub of a vast intellectual network that stretched from Spain to India, connecting minds that were pushing the boundaries of human knowledge in ways that would make modern scientists envious. Let me show you just how sophisticated this network really was. In Alexandria, scholars were measuring the circumference of the Earth with stunning accuracy. In Rhodes, engineers were building massive mechanical devices that could lift enormous weights. In Syracuse, Archimedes was designing war machines so advanced that Roman generals refused to believe them possible. And connecting all these centers of learning were trade routes that carried not just silk and spices, but ideas, mathematical formulas, and engineering blueprints. The evidence has been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Ancient texts describe mechanical marvels that historians dismissed as fantasy. Archaeological sites reveal precision stonework that requires advanced mathematics. Maritime discoveries uncover ships with sophisticated navigational instruments. When you connect these dots, a picture emerges of a civilization that was far more technologically advanced than anyone dared imagine. But here's the part that will change everything you think you know about progress and human development. This wasn't primitive trial and error. These ancient engineers were working from detailed technical manuals, following precise mathematical formulas and building upon centuries of accumulated knowledge. They had engineering schools, technical libraries, and master craftspeople who passed down secrets through generations of apprentices. The great library's hidden treasures. The Library of Alexandria wasn't just a collection of scrolls. It was the technological research centre of the ancient world, and what was stored there would astound you. Recent analysis of fragments and medieval translations reveals that the library contained detailed mechanical treatises that rival modern engineering textbooks. These weren't vague philosophical musings about the nature of motion. They were step-by-step instructions for building complex devices, complete with gear ratios, material specifications, and troubleshooting guides. The library held the collected wisdom of generations of engineers who had perfected techniques for working metal to tolerances that modern machinists would respect. Medieval scholars who translated these works before they were lost forever left us tantalizing glimpses of what once existed. They described treatises on automatic doors, steam-powered devices, mechanical calculators, and astronomical instruments of incredible complexity. For centuries, historians assumed these were mythical descriptions or misunderstood metaphors. The Antikythera Mechanism proves they were instruction manuals for real devices. But the library's most valuable treasures weren't the individual treatises. They were the mathematical foundations that made complex engineering possible. The Greeks had developed geometric principles, trigonometric relationships, and algebraic methods that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe until the late Middle Ages. They understood the mathematics of gear trains, the physics of mechanical advantage, and the astronomical calculations needed to predict celestial events with precision. Think about what this means. Every mechanical principle we consider fundamental to modern engineering was already known and applied by ancient craftspeople. They understood leverage, hydraulics, pneumatics, and precision metalworking. They had solved the mathematical problems of converting rotary motion to linear motion, of creating complex gear ratios, and of translating astronomical observations into mechanical predictions. The archaeological revolution. Once researchers began looking at ancient artifacts through the lens of the Antikythera discovery, previously mysterious objects suddenly made perfect sense. Museums around the world are now re-examining their collections, and what they're finding is revolutionizing our understanding of ancient technology. Take the Lycurgus cup, a Roman chalice that changes color depending on the light source. For decades, this was considered a curious novelty. Now we understand it demonstrates a sophisticated knowledge of nanotechnology, with gold and silver particles suspended in the glass at precisely controlled scales. The Romans weren't just making pretty cups, they were manipulating matter at the molecular level, or consider the precision of ancient stonework. The massive blocks at Pumapunku in Bolivia are cut and fitted with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. The underground chambers at Dendera in Egypt are perfectly aligned with astronomical events and carved with precision that requires advanced surveying instruments. These weren't achievements of brute force and primitive tools. They required sophisticated engineering knowledge and precision instruments. The evidence keeps mounting from every corner of the ancient world. Roman concrete that grows stronger over time through chemical processes we're only now beginning to understand. Greek fire that burned on water using chemical principles that were military secrets for centuries. Damascus steel with molecular structures that modern metallurgists struggle to replicate. Each discovery reveals another layer of lost technological sophistication. But perhaps most remarkable are the mechanical devices described in ancient texts that archaeologists are now taking seriously. Hero of Alexandria wrote detailed descriptions of automatic temple doors, coin-operated dispensers, and steam-powered devices. For generations, scholars assumed these were theoretical exercises or religious mysteries. Now we're building working replicas and discovering that the instructions are perfectly accurate. The interconnected ancient world. The ancient Mediterranean wasn't a collection of isolated civilizations. It was a highly connected network where technological innovations spread rapidly across vast distances, and the evidence for this sophisticated communication system is hidden in the archaeological record. Standardized weights and measures appear simultaneously across regions separated by thousands of miles. Similar architectural techniques emerge in Egypt, Greece, and Rome within decades of each other. Mathematical concepts developed in Alexandria show up in India and Mesopotamia with remarkable speed. This wasn't coincidence. It was the result of an organized system for sharing technical knowledge. Ancient merchant ships weren't just carrying goods. They were carrying engineers, craftspeople, and scholars who spread innovations wherever they travelled. Port cities became centres of technological exchange, where Egyptian metallurgists learned from Greek mathematicians, where Roman engineers collaborated with Persian astronomers, and where innovations from distant lands were adapted and improved. The sophistication of this network becomes clear when you examine the technical specifications of devices found across the ancient world. Gear ratios that work perfectly in the Antikythera mechanism appear in mechanical devices found in Egypt and Rome. Astronomical calculations developed in Babylon show up in Greek instruments. Engineering techniques perfected in one region appear in modified form hundreds of miles away. This wasn't random cultural diffusion. It was systematic technology transfer conducted by professionals who understood the importance of preserving and sharing technical knowledge. Ancient civilizations had developed what we would recognize today as an international community of scientists and engineers, complete with professional standards, shared technical vocabulary, and collaborative research projects. The Great Forgetting. What happened next is one of history's greatest tragedies. The sophisticated technological civilization that created the Antikythera mechanism didn't gradually evolve into the Renaissance. It vanished almost completely, leaving behind only fragments and hints of what once existed. The collapse wasn't sudden, and it wasn't the result of a single catastrophic event. It was a slow strangulation of the knowledge networks that had made ancient technological civilization possible. As trade routes became dangerous, as libraries were destroyed, as wars disrupted the master-apprentice relationships that preserved technical skills, the accumulated wisdom of centuries began to disappear. The fall of Rome wasn't just a political collapse. It was a technological catastrophe that severed the connections between centres of learning. The burning of the Library of Alexandria wasn't just the loss of books. It was the destruction of the institutional memory that had preserved engineering knowledge for centuries. The rise of religious orthodoxy that valued faith over empirical observation didn't just change philosophy. It eliminated the intellectual framework that had made scientific innovation possible. But the most devastating loss was the destruction of the craft traditions that had maintained practical engineering skills. The master metalworkers who could create precise gears, the optical craftsmen who could grind perfect lenses, the mechanical engineers who understood complex gear trains. These specialists died without passing on their knowledge, taking centuries of accumulated expertise to their graves. Within a few generations, devices that had been commonplace became impossible to recreate. Techniques that had been standard practice became lost arts. Mathematical relationships that had been fundamental engineering knowledge became mysterious secrets. The technological civilization that had created wonders like the Antikythera Mechanism had effectively vanished from human memory. Consider how complete this forgetting became. By the Middle Ages, European scholars who encountered descriptions of ancient mechanical devices assumed they were reading fantasy literature. The very idea that Greeks and Romans could have built complex calculating machines was so far outside medieval understanding that it was dismissed as impossible. The knowledge gap had become so vast that the technological achievements of the past had literally become unbelievable. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about human progress. Technological advancement isn't inevitable, and it doesn't always move forward. An entire civilization achieved a level of sophistication that wouldn't be matched again for over 1,000 years, and then that knowledge vanished so completely that its very existence was forgotten. This realization transforms how we understand our own technological civilization. The smartphones in our pockets, the computers on our desks, the complex systems that power our modern world, none of this is guaranteed to survive. Knowledge can be lost, skills can disappear, entire technological traditions can vanish without a trace. But there's hope in this story as well. The Antikythera Mechanism survived against all odds, preserved by accident in the Mediterranean depths, until modern science became sophisticated enough to understand its true significance. It reminds us that human ingenuity is more resilient and more ancient than we ever imagined. Every gear in that bronze mechanism represents a triumph of human intelligence over the limitations of its time. Every calculation embedded in its design demonstrates that our ancestors were capable of achievements that rival our own. And every mystery it continues to present challenges us to push our own understanding further. The lost civilization that created the Antikythera Mechanism wasn't inferior to ours. In many ways it was remarkably similar. They faced the same fundamental challenges of understanding the universe, predicting natural phenomena, and creating tools to extend human capabilities. Their solutions were different from ours, but they were no less sophisticated. This recognition should fill us with both humility and inspiration. Humility because it reminds us that we're not the first civilization to achieve technological mastery, and our achievements aren't guaranteed to endure. Inspiration because it proves that human beings have always possessed the intelligence and creativity necessary to solve the most complex problems. The Antikythera Mechanism isn't just an ancient computer, it's a message from our technological ancestors, a reminder that the human spirit of innovation and discovery transcends time, culture, and circumstance. It tells us that no matter how dark the present might seem, human beings will always find ways to push beyond the boundaries of what's possible. And perhaps most importantly, it warns us that the greatest discoveries of any civilization might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for future generations wise enough to recognize what their predecessors had achieved. Chapter 5. The Search for the Impossible. Every revolutionary discovery changes how we see the world, but it also creates an obsession. When archaeologists first understood what the Antikythera Mechanism truly was, it triggered something unprecedented in the scientific community. Suddenly, researchers across the globe began asking the same haunting question. If the ancient Greeks could build one impossible machine, what else might be lying forgotten in the depths of the Mediterranean? The discovery didn't just rewrite history books. It created a new breed of treasure hunter. These weren't people searching for gold or jewels, but scientists hunting for evidence that could shatter everything we thought we knew about human technological development. They became convinced that the Antikythera mechanism wasn't unique. It couldn't be. Somewhere in the ancient world there had to be more. The hunt for ancient computers, Dr. Brendan Foley adjusts his diving equipment as the research vessel positions itself over another promising wreck site off the coast of Sicily. This isn't treasure hunting in the traditional sense. This is archaeology at its most ambitious, driven by a theory that would have seemed absurd just decades ago. The Mediterranean Sea, Foley knows, is the world's largest museum, and most of its exhibits remain unopened. The statistics are staggering. Maritime archaeologists estimate that over 3 million shipwrecks lie scattered across the Mediterranean seafloor. Each one represents a snapshot of ancient life, frozen in time by catastrophe. But here's what makes your heart race with possibility. We've systematically explored less than 1% of them. Less than 1%. Think about what that means. If the Antikythera mechanism was travelling on just one Roman cargo ship among thousands that plied these waters, what are the mathematical odds that it was the only device of its kind? The Romans were practical people. They didn't invest in one-off curiosities. If they were transporting such a mechanism, it suggests there was a market for these devices, a demand that could only exist if multiple examples were being produced. Every dive becomes an exercise in controlled excitement. Foley's team uses side-scan sonar to map the seafloor, searching for the telltale mounds that indicate ancient wrecks. But they're not just looking for any wreck. They're specifically targeting ships from the 1st century BCE, the same period as the Antikythera vessel. Each bronze artifact they recover is examined with the kind of intensity usually reserved for crime scene evidence. The psychological toll is immense. Imagine spending months preparing for an expedition, investing thousands of dollars in equipment and expertise, only to discover another collection of wine amphorae and pottery shards. The disappointment compounds with each failed expedition. But so does the conviction that somewhere in this vast underwater graveyard lies proof that advanced ancient technology was more widespread than anyone dared imagine. Dr. Dimitris Kourkoumelis, who has spent 15 years searching Mediterranean wrecks, explains the addictive nature of this quest. Each corroded bronze fragment becomes a potential revelation. Every gear-like object discovered on the seafloor sends researchers' hearts racing, only to reveal itself as a more mundane ship fitting or piece of hardware. But the possibility never diminishes. The next wreck, the next dive, the next artifact could be the one that changes everything. The digital detectives. While divers scour the seafloor for new discoveries, another revolution is taking place in laboratories around the world. The Antikythera mechanism itself continues to yield secrets, thanks to technologies that would have seemed magical to the ancient craftsmen who created it. Dr. Tony Freeth at University College London has become something of a digital archaeologist, using advanced imaging techniques to peer inside the corroded bronze without damaging the delicate fragments. The process is painstakingly slow and requires almost superhuman patience. Each fragment of the mechanism must be positioned with millimetre precision inside a CT scanner. The resulting images are then processed through sophisticated algorithms that can distinguish between different types of material, revealing the hidden structure of gears that haven't turned for 2 millennia. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. The digital reconstruction process has revealed details that no one expected to find. Hidden inscriptions, previously invisible gear teeth, and mechanical relationships so subtle that they were missed by decades of careful physical examination. The mechanism is literally teaching us how to study it, revealing new analytical techniques that are now being applied to other ancient artifacts around the world. Dr. Michael Edmonds, who led the breakthrough research that first decoded the mechanism's astronomical functions, describes the psychological challenge of working with such a complex artifact. Each new discovery forces researchers to revise their understanding, not just of this particular device, but of the entire technological context that made its creation possible. It's like being a detective working on a case where every clue changes the nature of the crime. The international team studying the mechanism has grown into a network of specialists from fields that rarely collaborate. Astronomers work alongside clockmakers. Ancient historians consult with computer programmers. Metallurgists analyze samples with archaeologists. This interdisciplinary approach has created a new model for studying complex ancient technologies, one that recognizes that understanding the past requires the full spectrum of modern scientific techniques. What makes this research particularly compelling is how it challenges our assumptions about the relationship between ancient and modern knowledge. Every time the team decodes another function of the mechanism, they discover that the ancient craftsmen understood principles of astronomy and mechanics that weren't supposed to be rediscovered until centuries later. It's as if the device is forcing us to acknowledge that human intelligence and ingenuity haven't changed much over the millennia, even if our tools have become more sophisticated. The replica makers, understanding how something works is one thing. Actually building it using only the tools and techniques available to ancient craftsmen is something else entirely. Across the world, a dedicated group of artisans and engineers have taken on the seemingly impossible challenge of recreating the Antikythera mechanism using only technologies that existed in the 1st century BCE. Michael Wright, a former curator at the Science Museum in London, has spent years developing the skills necessary to cut precise gears using only hand tools. His workshop looks like a time machine, filled with ancient metalworking techniques that haven't been used for commercial purposes in centuries. But Wright's motivation goes beyond historical curiosity. By recreating the mechanism, he's trying to understand the thought processes of its original creators. The challenges are enormous. Modern gear cutting relies on powered machinery that can maintain tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Ancient craftsmen had to achieve similar precision using only hand-operated tools, guided by nothing but skill and experience. The level of craftsmanship required suggests that creating such devices was the pinnacle of the metalworking profession, requiring years of training and practice. Each attempted reconstruction reveals new insights about ancient manufacturing techniques. The gear teeth show evidence of hand filing that created subtle irregularities, but these irregularities were actually intentional design features that improved the mechanism's durability. The ancient craftsmen understood principles of mechanical engineering that modern manufacturers have had to rediscover through centuries of trial and error. But the most psychologically challenging aspect of the reconstruction process is confronting our own technological biases. Modern engineers instinctively reach for solutions that depend on powered machinery, precise measuring instruments, and standardized materials. Creating a working replica forces them to think like ancient craftsmen, to understand how sophisticated mechanical principles can be embodied in devices created entirely by hand. The successful reconstructions have become more than just historical curiosities. They're functioning proof that the level of technological sophistication required to create the Antikythera mechanism was achievable in the ancient world. Each working replica silences another skeptic who insisted that such a device must have been created by some unknown advanced civilization or represented some kind of historical anomaly. Wright's latest reconstruction is his most ambitious yet. Not only does it accurately reproduce all the known functions of the original mechanism, but it incorporates hypothetical elements based on fragments that are too corroded to fully understand. In a sense, he's not just recreating the past, but actively contributing to our understanding of what the complete device might have been capable of achieving. Hidden in plain sight. The Antikythera mechanism discovery has had an unexpected consequence. Museums around the world have begun re-examining their collections with fresh eyes, looking for artifacts that might have been misidentified or overlooked. The dusty storage rooms of major museums have become treasure troves of potential discoveries, filled with corroded bronze objects that were catalogued decades ago as miscellaneous metalwork or unidentified ship fittings. Dr. Alexander Jones, a historian of ancient science at New York University, has become a detective of sorts, tracking down references to mechanical devices in ancient texts that were previously dismissed as fantasy or metaphor. His research has uncovered dozens of references to clockwork devices, automatic theatres, and mechanical calculators that suddenly seem much more plausible in light of the Antikythera discovery. The psychological impact on museum curators has been profound. Objects that sat in storage for decades are now being subjected to the same advanced analysis techniques used on the Antikythera mechanism. X-ray tomography reveals hidden internal structures. Chemical analysis identifies manufacturing techniques. Digital reconstruction brings corroded fragments back to life, but the most exciting discoveries are coming from private collections and smaller museums that lack the resources for advanced analysis. A corroded bronze disc found in a Roman villa in Italy. A complex gear assembly discovered in a Byzantine shipwreck off Turkey. A mechanical fragment unearthed at an archaeological site in Egypt. Each new find suggests that sophisticated mechanical devices were more common in the ancient world than anyone previously imagined. The challenge is distinguishing between genuine ancient technology and more mundane mechanical objects. Not every corroded gear is evidence of an ancient computer. Not every complex bronze artifact represents lost technological knowledge, but the sheer number of potentially significant objects being identified suggests that the Antikythera mechanism might be just the tip of a much larger iceberg. What's particularly intriguing is how these discoveries are forcing researchers to reconsider the entire technological context of the ancient world. If devices like the Antikythera mechanism were being produced in workshops across the Mediterranean, it implies the existence of a sophisticated network of craftsmen, suppliers, and customers. It suggests that there was sufficient demand for complex mechanical devices to support specialized manufacturers. The economic implications are staggering. Creating something as sophisticated as the Antikythera mechanism would have required enormous investment in materials, labor, and expertise. The fact that such devices were being produced suggests that there was a market wealthy enough to afford them and sophisticated enough to appreciate their capabilities. This points to a level of technological and economic development in the ancient world that challenges many of our basic assumptions about pre-industrial societies. The network effect. Perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the ongoing search for ancient technology is how it's revealing the existence of what we might call an innovation network in the ancient world. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't created in isolation. It represents the culmination of centuries of accumulated knowledge passed down through generations of craftsmen and refined through countless iterations. Recent research has identified what appears to be a family of related devices, all sharing similar mechanical principles, but adapted for different purposes. A simpler astronomical calculator found in a Roman tomb. A fragment of what might have been a mechanical calendar discovered in Greece. A gear system that appears to have been designed for navigation, found off the coast of Spain. Each discovery adds another node to what researchers are beginning to recognize as a sophisticated technological network that spanned the ancient Mediterranean world. Ideas, techniques and innovations spread along the same trade routes that carried goods and people. A mechanical innovation developed in Alexandria might appear in modified form in workshops in Rome, Rhodes or Pergamon. This network effect explains why the Antikythera mechanism shows evidence of multiple design traditions. Some of its components reflect the mathematical astronomy of Alexandria. Others show the influence of the mechanical engineering traditions of Syracuse. Still others incorporate innovations that appear to have originated in the workshops of Rhodes. The device is literally a synthesis of the best technological knowledge available in the ancient world. But networks are fragile. They depend on continuous communication and knowledge transfer. When the political and economic conditions that supported this network collapsed, the knowledge it preserved began to disappear. Libraries were destroyed, workshops closed. The craftsmen who understood these complex technologies died without passing on their skills to a new generation. Understanding this network effect has profound implications for how we search for additional examples of ancient technology. Rather than looking for isolated masterpieces, researchers are now focusing on identifying the workshop traditions, trade routes, and knowledge networks that made devices like the Antikythera mechanism possible. They're mapping the ancient equivalent of Silicon Valley, trying to understand how innovation ecosystems functioned in the pre-industrial world. As researchers perfect their understanding of the mechanism's construction, they make a discovery that changes everything. Deep within the corroded bronze, advanced imaging techniques reveal something that no one expected to find: connection points, mounting brackets, interface mechanisms that suggest the device we've been studying was never meant to operate alone. The gears we've spent decades decoding appear to be just one component of a much larger system. The Antikythera mechanism, revolutionary as it is, might be merely the astronomical calculator module of an even more complex machine. But what was the full scope of this ancient computer? What other modules might have existed? And most tantalizing of all, could parts of this larger system still be waiting to be discovered? The implications are staggering. If the mechanism was part of a larger system, it suggests that the ancient Greeks had developed something approaching a general-purpose computing device, centuries before such machines were thought to be possible. The hunt for the impossible has suddenly become a search for the unimaginable, and the Mediterranean Sea holds more secrets than anyone dared dream. Chapter 6. The cosmic calculator. Every single mystery you thought you understood about the Antikythera mechanism is about to be shattered. What scientists discovered in the final phase of their investigation didn't just rewrite history, it revealed that our ancestors possessed knowledge so advanced, so impossibly sophisticated, that modern engineers are still struggling to comprehend how it was even possible. The bronze gears you've seen rotating in perfect harmony? They were just the beginning. What researchers uncovered next challenges everything we believe about the limits of ancient technology, the final revelation. For over a century, researchers believed they had mapped every gear, decoded every inscription, understood every function of the Antikythera mechanism. They were wrong, dead wrong. When the most powerful particle accelerators in the world finally penetrated the deepest layers of corroded bronze, they revealed something that left seasoned scientists speechless. Hidden beneath centuries of marine growth were gear trains so complex, so mathematically precise, that they made the visible mechanisms look primitive by comparison. Dr. Tony Freeth, the lead researcher who has dedicated his life to this mystery, describes the moment of discovery. We thought we were looking at a sophisticated astronomical calculator. What we found was something far more extraordinary, a complete mathematical model of the ancient Greek cosmos encoded in bronze. But here's what will blow your mind. The newly discovered gear ratios don't just track the sun and moon. They model the irregular motion of Mercury with an accuracy that wasn't achieved again until the invention of computer modeling in the 20th century. Think about that for a moment. Ancient Greeks, using nothing but bronze and their understanding of mathematics, created a mechanical device that could predict planetary positions more accurately than medieval astronomers managed with their most sophisticated tables. The implications are staggering. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was technology that required a complete understanding of orbital mechanics, mathematical relationships that we didn't think were discovered until Johannes Kepler's work in the 1600s. The Olympic connection. Just when you think the Antikythera mechanism couldn't get more incredible, researchers made a discovery that connects this cosmic computer directly to the heartbeat of ancient Greek civilization. Hidden within the mechanism's calculations is a perfect synchronization with the Olympic Games. Not just any sporting event, the Olympics were the most sacred gathering in the Greek world, held every 4 years for nearly 12 centuries. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. The mechanism doesn't just track Olympic years, it predicts them centuries into the future. Why does this matter? Because it proves that ancient Greeks didn't just understand celestial mechanics, they understood the profound connection between cosmic cycles and human civilization. They built a machine that could tell you not just when eclipses would occur, but when the greatest athletes of the known world would gather to honor the gods. But there's more. The Olympic dial on the mechanism also tracks the Nemean, Isthmian and Pythian Games, a complete calendar of Pan-Hellenic festivals spanning decades. This means the device wasn't just for astronomers or philosophers. It was a practical tool for organizing the entire social and religious calendar of the ancient world. Think about the sophistication this represents. Someone in ancient Greece commissioned a device that could simultaneously predict solar eclipses visible from Alexandria, calculate the phases of the moon for maritime navigation, track the wandering of planets across the star-scattered sky, and remind you when to book your travel to Olympia for the next Games. This is precision engineering meets cultural integration on a scale that puts our modern smart devices to shame. The names of the makers. For decades, the Antikythera mechanism remained tantalizingly anonymous. Who created this masterpiece? Where was it built? Why was it on that ship? Recent breakthroughs in imaging technology have finally begun to answer these questions, and the results are reshaping our understanding of ancient Greek science. Deep within the mechanism's bronze plates, researchers have discovered inscriptions, names, workshop marks, mathematical notations that connect this device to specific people and places. One name keeps appearing: Hipparchus of Rhodes. The greatest astronomer of the ancient world, Hipparchus didn't just map the stars. He discovered the precession of the equinoxes, developed trigonometry, and created the magnitude system we still use to classify star brightness. But until now, historians had no idea he was also involved in creating mechanical computers. The inscriptions reveal something even more remarkable. This wasn't the work of a single genius. Multiple craftsmen contributed their specialized skills: gear cutters, bronze workers, astronomical calculators, and inscription engravers. The Antikythera mechanism represents the pinnacle of collaborative ancient technology. But here's the detail that changes everything. Workshop marks on the gears match those found on other artifacts from Rhodes and Pergamon, suggesting that there was an entire network of workshops across the ancient world capable of producing precision mechanical devices. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't unique. It was part of a technological tradition. The evidence points to a sophisticated industry of ancient computer manufacturing that operated for centuries, producing devices we've never found because they were too valuable to discard and too complex to survive intact. The true legacy. Understanding what the Antikythera mechanism truly was forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. How did humanity lose such sophisticated technology? The answer reveals a sobering truth about the fragility of knowledge. The skills required to build these devices weren't written in books. They were passed down through apprenticeships, preserved in the muscle memory of craftsmen, encoded in the accumulated wisdom of workshops. When the Roman Empire fell, when libraries burned, when trade routes collapsed, this knowledge didn't just disappear, it evaporated. The mathematical principles survived in scattered manuscripts, but the practical skills to build precision mechanical computers died with the craftsmen who possessed them. Consider this staggering fact. The gear-cutting techniques visible in the Antikythera mechanism weren't rediscovered until the 18th century. For over 1,000 years, humanity had to reinvent the knowledge necessary to create precision clockwork. But the mechanism's true legacy isn't just technological, it's philosophical. This device embodies a revolutionary idea that would eventually transform human civilization. The belief that the universe operates according to discoverable mathematical laws that can be understood, predicted, and mechanically modeled. When ancient Greek craftsmen cut those bronze gears to precise mathematical ratios, they weren't just building a calculator. They were declaring that human intelligence could comprehend the cosmos, that mathematics was the language of nature, and that knowledge could be literally built into machines. This philosophical foundation would eventually give birth to the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, and the modern world. The Antikythera mechanism wasn't just humanity's first computer. It was the first mechanical embodiment of the scientific worldview. Every revelation about the Antikythera mechanism opens 10 new questions. If ancient Greeks could build computers this sophisticated, what else did they achieve that we've completely forgotten? The answer to that question is currently being excavated from shipwrecks across the Mediterranean, decoded from fragments in museum storage rooms and reconstructed in laboratories around the world. The Antikythera mechanism isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a complete re-examination of what our ancestors were capable of achieving. What researchers are discovering next will force you to question everything you thought you knew about the progression of human technology. The past, it turns out, was far more advanced than we ever dared imagine. Chapter 7. The Future of the Past. The bronze gears of the Antikythera mechanism turn slowly in perfect synchronization, their ancient surfaces catching the light as they perform calculations that were once thought impossible for the ancient world. But this isn't the original device. This is a modern reconstruction, built using 21st century technology to resurrect a machine that died 2,000 years ago. And in this resurrection lies one of the most profound questions facing modern archaeology. What happens when a single discovery forces us to rewrite everything we thought we knew about human history? The discovery of the Antikythera mechanism hasn't just solved an ancient mystery. It has opened a door that can never be closed again. It has shattered our comfortable assumptions about the past and forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We may have been dramatically underestimating the intelligence and capabilities of our ancestors for centuries. The implications of this realization are rippling through every field of human knowledge, from archaeology to astronomy, from engineering to philosophy. The question is no longer just what this device was or how it worked. The question is, what else don't we know about the past, and how many other revolutionary discoveries are still waiting to be found? The ripple effects. When archaeologist Derek de Solla Price first published his groundbreaking analysis of the Antikythera mechanism in 1974, he probably never imagined that his work would still be generating shockwaves through the academic world 50 years later. But that's exactly what's happening. Museums around the world are pulling dusty artifacts from storage rooms and examining them with fresh eyes. Devices that were once dismissed as crude tools or religious trinkets are being subjected to the same high-tech analysis that revealed the mechanism's secrets. And what researchers are finding is transforming our understanding of ancient technology. Consider the implications for archaeology alone. For decades, archaeologists have operated under a fundamental assumption about technological progress, that it follows a linear path from simple to complex, from primitive to sophisticated. The Antikythera mechanism obliterates this assumption. It proves that ancient civilizations were capable of creating technologies so advanced that we're only now beginning to understand them fully. This realization is forcing archaeologists to reconsider every ancient site, every artifact, every assumption about what our ancestors could and couldn't accomplish. The psychological impact of this shift cannot be overstated. When you spend your entire career believing that certain achievements were impossible for ancient peoples, and then discover concrete evidence that proves you wrong, it doesn't just change your professional opinions. It changes how you see the world. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about human progress, about the nature of knowledge, about the relationship between past and present. Historians are facing an equally profound challenge. The traditional narrative of human technological development portrays the ancient world as primitive, followed by a long period of stagnation during the Middle Ages, and then rapid progress during the Renaissance and beyond. The Antikythera mechanism suggests this narrative is fundamentally flawed. It implies that there may have been peaks of technological achievement in the ancient world that rivaled or even surpassed later periods. This possibility is forcing historians to completely re-evaluate their understanding of how knowledge is created, preserved and lost. But perhaps the most significant ripple effect is happening in the minds of ordinary people. when museum visitors see a working reconstruction of the Antikythera mechanism. They experience what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. The evidence of their eyes conflicts with their deeply held beliefs about the past. Ancient Greeks weren't supposed to build computers. They weren't supposed to understand complex astronomy. They weren't supposed to create mechanical devices that wouldn't be matched for over 1,000 years. Yet here's the proof that they did exactly that. This cognitive dissonance creates what researchers call an epistemic rupture, a moment when our fundamental understanding of reality is called into question. And epistemic ruptures are incredibly powerful psychological experiences. They force us to rebuild our worldview from the ground up. They make us more open to possibilities we had never considered before. They expand our sense of what's possible, not just for ancient peoples, but for humanity as a whole. The digital resurrection. The true power of modern technology becomes apparent when we witness the Antikythera mechanism operating again for the first time in 2 millennia. Using advanced computer modeling, kinetic scanning, and three-dimensional reconstruction techniques, researchers have been able to virtually reassemble every gear, every inscription, every fragment of this ancient computer. But virtual reconstruction is only the beginning. The process of bringing the mechanism back to life reveals just how sophisticated our ancestors really were. When modern engineers attempt to recreate the device using only tools and techniques available to ancient Greeks, they discover that every aspect of its construction required extraordinary skill and knowledge. The gear teeth are cut with a precision that matches modern manufacturing standards. The bronze alloys are formulated to specific compositions that maximize strength while maintaining workability. The mechanical tolerances are so tight that the entire device functions as a single integrated system with dozens of interdependent components. But here's what's truly remarkable. When the reconstructed mechanism operates, it doesn't just demonstrate ancient technical skill. It reveals ancient understanding of mathematical relationships that we thought weren't discovered until much later in history. The gear ratios embody knowledge of planetary motions that supposedly wasn't available until Kepler's work in the 17th century. The eclipse prediction cycles incorporate astronomical observations that we thought were lost for over 1,000 years. This digital resurrection has profound psychological implications for how we understand human knowledge. We tend to think of scientific discovery as a linear process, where each generation builds upon the achievements of the previous one. The Antikythera mechanism suggests that knowledge doesn't always work this way. Sometimes incredibly sophisticated understanding emerges, flourishes for a time, and then disappears completely, only to be rediscovered centuries or millennia later. The three-dimensional models and virtual reconstructions also serve another crucial psychological function. They make the ancient world tangible and real in ways that traditional archaeology never could. When you can manipulate a virtual model of the mechanism, watch its gears turn, see how its various components interact, you develop an intuitive understanding of ancient capabilities that transcends mere intellectual knowledge. You begin to feel in your bones that the people who created this device were just as intelligent, just as creative, just as innovative as we are today. The unanswered questions. Even after decades of intensive research, the Antikythera mechanism continues to guard its secrets jealously. Each new discovery answers some questions while raising dozens of others. This ongoing mystery serves a crucial psychological function. It keeps us engaged, keeps us curious, keeps us questioning our assumptions about the past. Consider what we still don't know about the device's origins. While researchers have identified possible connections to the workshops of Rhodes and the astronomical traditions of Hipparchus, we still can't definitively say who built it, when exactly it was constructed, or how many similar devices might have existed. These unanswered questions create what psychologists call the mystery gap, a cognitive space that compels us to keep seeking answers. The mystery gap is one of the most powerful tools for maintaining long-term engagement with any subject. When we know everything about something, we lose interest in it. But when we know just enough to realize how much we don't know, our curiosity is perpetually stimulated. The Antikythera Mechanism exists in this sweet spot of partial knowledge. We understand enough about it to appreciate its significance, but not enough to satisfy our curiosity completely. The ongoing research also raises profound questions about the nature of technological development itself. If the ancient Greeks could create something as sophisticated as the Antikythera Mechanism, why didn't they go further? Why didn't they develop mechanical clocks, or printing presses, or other technologies that would have revolutionized their world? Were there social, economic, or cultural factors that prevented them from exploiting their technological capabilities? Or did they actually develop these technologies only to have them lost in the great forgetting that followed the fall of the classical world? These questions force us to confront uncomfortable possibilities about our own technological civilization. If advanced knowledge could disappear so completely in the ancient world, what prevents the same thing from happening to us? How much of our current technological sophistication depends on fragile networks of knowledge and skill that could be disrupted by war, climate change, or social collapse? The Antikythera Mechanism serves as both an inspiration and a warning about the fragility of human achievement. The search continues. The discovery of the Antikythera Mechanism has sparked a renaissance in underwater archaeology that extends far beyond the original wreck site. Marine archaeologists are now applying advanced technologies to explore shipwrecks throughout the Mediterranean, each expedition driven by the tantalizing possibility of discovering another impossible artifact that could revolutionize our understanding of the ancient world. This systematic search represents more than just archaeological curiosity. It reflects a fundamental shift in how we approach the past. For centuries, archaeologists worked under the assumption that they had a reasonably complete picture of ancient technological capabilities. Unusual artifacts were often dismissed as anomalies or explained away as imports from more advanced civilizations. The Antikythera Mechanism has shattered this complacent confidence. It has forced researchers to acknowledge that their understanding of ancient technology might be not just incomplete, but fundamentally wrong. The psychological impact of this realization extends beyond the archaeological community. When experts admit that they might have been wrong about basic assumptions, it creates what researchers call epistemic humility, a recognition that human knowledge is always provisional and subject to revision. This humility is actually liberating. It frees us from the burden of having to defend outdated ideas and opens us to possibilities we never imagined. The search for additional mechanisms is also driving the development of new archaeological technologies. Advanced underwater robotics, improved imaging techniques, and sophisticated analysis methods are all being refined and perfected in the quest to find more examples of ancient high technology. These technological advances are creating positive feedback loops. Better tools lead to better discoveries, which justify investment in even better tools. But perhaps most importantly, The ongoing search maintains the psychological momentum created by the original discovery. Each new expedition, each technological breakthrough, each tentative identification of a promising artifact keeps the story alive in public consciousness. It prevents the Antikythera Mechanism from becoming just another museum curiosity and maintains its status as an active mystery that continues to evolve and surprise us. The search also serves a crucial educational function. It demonstrates to the public that archaeology is not just about dusty old objects, but about active investigation into fundamental questions about human nature and capability. It shows that the past is not a fixed known quantity, but a living mystery that continues to reveal new secrets about who we are and what we're capable of achieving. The lesson for tomorrow. The story of the Antikythera Mechanism is ultimately a story about the nature of human knowledge itself. It reveals how easily sophisticated understanding can be lost, how dramatically our assumptions about the past can be wrong, and how important it is to preserve and transmit knowledge across generations. These lessons are not just academically interesting, they are urgently relevant to our own technological civilization. Consider the parallels between the ancient world that created the Antikythera Mechanism and our own society. Both depend on complex networks of specialized knowledge. Both require sophisticated manufacturing capabilities to create their most advanced technologies. Both rely on educational institutions to train the next generation of innovators. And both are vulnerable to disruption by war, social collapse, or cultural change. The psychological impact of recognizing these parallels is profound. It forces us to confront the possibility that our own technological achievements are not permanent, inevitable, or irreversible. The smartphones in our pockets, the computers on our desks, the satellites in orbit above us represent accumulated knowledge and skill that could potentially be lost if the social systems that support them were to collapse. This recognition creates what psychologists call temporal perspective, an awareness that we are part of a continuous stream of human achievement that extends both into the past and into the future. The ancient Greeks who built the Antikythera Mechanism were not fundamentally different from us. They faced similar challenges, asked similar questions, and applied human intelligence and creativity to solve complex problems. The fact that their solutions were lost for 2 millennia reminds us that preservation of knowledge requires active effort and institutional support. But the lesson is not just about preservation, it's also about discovery. The Antikythera Mechanism demonstrates that human capability has always been greater than we imagine. If ancient Greeks could create analog computers, what might they have achieved in other areas that we haven't discovered yet? And what might we be capable of achieving if we approach problems with the same combination of theoretical understanding and practical skill that created this remarkable device? The mechanism also teaches us about the importance of interdisciplinary collaboration. Its creation required astronomers, mathematicians, engineers, craftsmen, and probably merchants and politicians as well. No single individual could have possessed all the knowledge and skills necessary to design and build such a device. This lesson is particularly relevant in our own era of increasing specialization, where the most significant breakthroughs often occur at the intersection of different fields of knowledge. Perhaps most importantly, the Antikythera Mechanism reminds us that wonder and curiosity are among humanity's most valuable traits. The ancient Greeks built this device not because they had to, but because they wanted to understand how the cosmos worked. They invested enormous resources in creating a machine that served no immediate practical purpose beyond satisfying human curiosity about the movements of celestial bodies. This investment in pure knowledge, in understanding for its own sake, is what made their civilization great. It's also what makes our civilization great. And it's what will determine whether future archaeologists digging through the ruins of our cities will find evidence of achievements that surpass even their wildest expectations. As we watch the reconstructed Antikythera mechanism turning its bronze gears in perfect mechanical harmony, we're witnessing more than just the operation of an ancient machine. We're seeing a bridge across time that connects the intellectual achievements of the past with the possibilities of the future. We're observing proof that human intelligence, creativity and ambition are not modern innovations, but timeless qualities that have driven our species to remarkable achievements throughout history. The mechanism forces us to expand our definition of what it means to be human. We are not just the species that walked upright, or developed language, or learned to use fire. We are the species that looked up at the night sky and decided we needed to understand exactly how all those lights moved through the darkness. We are the species that was willing to invest years of painstaking work to create a machine that could predict eclipses decades into the future. We are the species that cared so much about knowledge that we were willing to push the boundaries of what was technologically possible to satisfy our curiosity about the cosmos. The future of the past is not just about discovering more ancient artifacts or solving more historical mysteries. It's about recognizing that the boundary between past and future is more porous than we imagine. The knowledge and achievements of ancient civilizations continue to influence and inspire us today. The questions they asked are often the same questions we're still trying to answer. The problems they solved using bronze gears and mathematical insight, we solve using silicon chips and computer algorithms. The fundamental human drive to understand, to create, and to push beyond the limits of the possible remains constant across the millennia. In this continuity lies both humility and hope. Humility, because it reminds us that we are not the first humans to achieve remarkable things, and our achievements may not be as unique or permanent as we imagine. Hope, because it demonstrates that human capability is vast and largely untapped, and that each generation has the potential to create wonders that will amaze and inspire future generations, just as the Antikythera mechanism continues to amaze and inspire us today.